The red thong wedged under the passenger seat of the Rolls-Royce wasn't mine. Hell, it wasn't even close to my wife's size. I held it up in the dim garage light, wondering if some rich client had left behind evidence of a backseat rendezvous. But something felt wrong. Very wrong. My name is Owen Carter, and I've been running Carter Clean Mobile Detailing for 8 years. Started with nothing but a beat-up van, some rags, and the kind of determination that comes from having nowhere else to go. Now I've got 3 crews, a decent reputation in this Rust Belt town outside Detroit, and a wife who handles the books while I handle everything else. Or so I thought. Marin had been acting strange for months. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into a room. Errands that took 3 hours when they should have taken 30 minutes. Mileage on our shared work van that didn't match the route sheets. When I asked about it, she'd give me that look. The one that said I was being paranoid, controlling, just another insecure husband who couldn't trust his wife. Maybe I was paranoid, but paranoia doesn't explain finding women's underwear in a client's car that we'd detailed together just 2 days ago. I dropped the thong into a plastic bag and labeled it with the client's name and date, same way I'd document any found item. Professional habits die hard, but my mind was racing. The rolls belonged to Mrs. Henderson, a 70-year-old widow who could barely climb into the driver's seat, let alone contort herself into compromising positions in the back. That meant someone else had been in that car, someone who had access to our client vehicles, someone who knew our schedule, our routes, our security procedures. The garage felt smaller suddenly, cramped with suspicion and the smell of cleaning chemicals. I'd built this business from nothing, trusted my employees like family. Tyler Brooks, my assistant manager, had been with me for 3 years. He knew every client, every procedure, every detail of our operation. He was the guy I called when I needed someone reliable, someone who could handle the high-end clients when I was tied up with paperwork or family obligations. Tyler was 28, single, and had that easy charm that made clients feel comfortable handing over their car keys. He was also the only other person besides Marin and me who had access to all our vehicles. I sat down on my workbench, staring at the evidence bag. The rational part of my brain said there had to be an explanation. Maybe Tyler was seeing someone, and they'd used a client car for privacy. Stupid, unprofessional, fireable, but not necessarily involving my wife. But the knot in my stomach said otherwise. Marin had been working late more often, always with excuses about catching up on payroll or organizing client files. She'd started dressing better for these late nights, wearing perfume to the office when she used to save it for date nights that had become increasingly rare. When I suggested we grab dinner together after work, she'd claim she was too busy, too tired, too stressed to spend time with her own husband. I looked around the garage at everything I'd built. The professional-grade steam cleaners, the organized tool cabinets, the awards from the local business association hanging on the wall. This was my life's work, and if my suspicions were right, it was being used as a backdrop for my wife's betrayal. The smart thing would be to confront her directly, ask the hard questions and demand honest answers. But Marin was clever, always had been. She handled our books, knew every legal protection we had in place, understood the business better than anyone except me. If she was hiding something, she'd have covered her tracks. I needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence that would stand up to scrutiny. That's when I remembered the dash cam Tyler had suggested we install in the work van for insurance purposes. Protects us from false claims, he'd said. Shows we're not responsible for any damage that was already there. We'd never gotten around to installing it, but I still had the camera in its original packaging, sitting on a shelf in my office. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler's own suggestion might be the tool that exposed him. I found the camera and read through the installation instructions. It was designed to be discreet, recording continuously while the vehicle was in operation. The memory card could store up to 48 hours of footage before overwriting itself. More than enough to capture whatever was happening during those mysterious late-night errands. Installing it took 20 minutes. I positioned it behind the rearview mirror where it would be nearly invisible, ran the power cable along the headliner, and activated the motion detection feature. If someone entered the van after hours, the camera would start recording automatically. Maren came home at 11:30 that night, claiming she'd been organizing client files and lost track of time. She kissed my cheek absently, showered longer than usual, and fell asleep with her phone face down on the nightstand. I lay awake until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I was about to destroy my marriage over a piece of red fabric and a bad feeling. The next day felt like walking through molasses. Every interaction with Maren seemed loaded with hidden meaning. When she said she'd be working late again, I just nodded and told her to drive safely. When Tyler showed up for his afternoon shift, I watched him more carefully than usual, looking for signs of guilt or nervousness. He seemed normal, maybe a little more cheerful than usual, joking with our other employees and handling client calls with his typical professionalism. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was letting paranoia poison my relationships with the two people I trusted most. But that night, Maren took the van again for another late-night work session, and this time I had a camera recording every moment. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house made me think Maren was coming home, and I'd rehearse what I would say, how I would act normal. She finally returned at 2:15 in the morning, moving quietly through the house like she was trying not to wake me. I pretended to be asleep when she slipped into bed, but I could smell unfamiliar cologne mixed with her usual perfume. The next morning, I waited until Maren left for her regular office hours before checking the camera. My hands shook as I removed the memory card and inserted it into my laptop. The footage was time-stamped and crystal clear, showing the interior of the van from multiple angles. Most of it was exactly what I expected. Maren driving to client locations, organizing paperwork, making phone calls, normal business activities that matched her explanations. For a moment, I felt relieved, even guilty for doubting her. Then I reached the footage from 10:30 the previous night. Maren had driven to the parking lot behind Riverside Park, a secluded area where teenagers went to drink and couples went for privacy. The camera showed her checking her phone, adjusting her makeup in the rearview mirror, and waiting. At 10:45, another vehicle pulled up beside the van. Tyler Brooks got out of his Honda Civic and climbed into the passenger seat of my van. What happened next made my stomach drop through the floor. There was no discussion of work schedules or client files. Tyler immediately pulled Maren toward him, and they kissed with the desperate passion of people who had been waiting all day for this moment. Her hands were in his hair, his hands were under her blouse, and within minutes they were climbing into the back of the van where we kept the cleaning supplies. I watched my wife of 7 years have intimacy with my employee in the back of my work vehicle, surrounded by the steam cleaners and detailing equipment I'd bought to build our future together. The footage was explicit, undeniable, and absolutely devastating. They moved with the familiarity of people who had done this many times before, not the awkwardness of a first encounter. When they finished, they didn't immediately separate. Instead, they lay together, talking quietly, laughing, touching each other with casual intimacy. I couldn't make out the words, but their body language spoke volumes. This wasn't just intimacy. This was a relationship. The betrayal hit me in waves. First, the obvious fact that my wife was cheating. Second, that she was cheating with Tyler, someone I'd trusted completely. Third, that they were using my business, my equipment, my reputation as their personal love nest. And finally, the realization that this had been going on for months, maybe longer, while I'd been working myself to exhaustion to build something I thought we were building together. I watched the footage 3 more times, looking for any detail I might have missed, any alternative explanation that would make this less devastating. But there was no ambiguity. Maren and Tyler were having an affair, and they were using my business to facilitate it. The smart thing would have been to confront them immediately, demand explanations, file for divorce, fire Tyler, and start the messy process of rebuilding my life. But I'd built my business by being methodical, careful, and strategic. Emotional reactions led to mistakes, and mistakes in this situation could cost me everything I'd worked for. Instead, I made a plan. First, I copied the footage to multiple secure locations and documented everything with timestamps and technical details. If this ended up in court, I wanted evidence that couldn't be challenged or dismissed. Second, I started reviewing our business records more carefully. If Marin and Tyler were betraying me personally, they might be stealing from me professionally. Our books were complicated enough that small discrepancies could be hidden easily, especially by someone who understood the system as well as Marin did. Third, I began quietly securing my legal and financial position. I met with my attorney to discuss asset protection and divorce procedures. I opened a separate business account and started directing new client payments there instead of our joint account. I updated our insurance policies to ensure I'd be covered if employee misconduct led to claims or lawsuits. And fourth, I started gathering intelligence on exactly how deep this betrayal went. I installed additional cameras in strategic locations around our office and garage, all completely legal since I owned the property and the business. I started tracking vehicle usage more carefully, cross-referencing mileage reports with client schedules and route efficiency. I paid closer attention to Tyler's behavior, his schedule, his interactions with other employees. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. The affair had been going on for at least 6 months, based on patterns in our vehicle logs and Marin's schedule changes. They'd been using client cars for their encounters, not just our work van, which explained the red thong in Mrs. Henderson's Rolls-Royce. They'd been scheduling fake appointments to justify being out of the office together, billing clients for services that were never performed while they were busy with their personal activities. Worst of all, they'd been stealing. Small amounts at first, probably to test whether I'd notice. Cash payments that never made it to the books. Expensive detailing products that disappeared from inventory. Client tips that were pocketed instead of reported. The total was over $8,000 across 6 months, not enough to bankrupt the business, but enough to constitute felony theft. I had them dead to rights on adultery, theft, fraud, and misuse of company property. I could have destroyed them both with a single phone call to the police, but I wanted something more than legal victory. I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd thrown away, and I wanted everyone who knew us to see their true characters. I wanted revenge that would last longer than a court case, so I kept gathering evidence, kept playing the oblivious husband, kept treating Tyler like a trusted employee. I smiled when Marin kissed me goodbye in the mornings, knowing she'd be meeting Tyler before lunch. I thanked Tyler for his hard work, knowing he was stealing from me while sleeping with my wife. I played the fool while building a case that would demolish both of their lives. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy. Marin would come home from her late nights and tell me about her day, mixing truth with lies so smoothly that I almost admired her skill. Tyler would joke with me about client demands and business challenges, acting like the loyal employee while planning his next theft. They were both excellent actors, which made me wonder how long I'd been the only one who didn't know about their performance. But I was patient. I'd built my business by paying attention to details others missed, by being more thorough and more persistent than my competition. Those same skills would serve me well in destroying the people who'd betrayed me. 3 weeks after discovering the camera footage, I had everything I needed. Financial records, video evidence, documented lies, proof of theft, and a detailed timeline of their deception. I also had a plan that would expose them both in the most public and humiliating way possible. It was time to stop playing the fool and start playing the villain. The first phase of my plan required patience and precision. I needed to separate my legitimate business assets from anything Marin or Tyler could claim or damage during the inevitable confrontation. This meant quietly restructuring our financial arrangements without raising suspicion. I started by meeting with Janet Morrison, our business attorney, under the pretense of updating our insurance coverage and employee contracts. Janet had handled our legal work since the beginning, and she knew our business structure better than anyone. "I'm concerned about liability issues," I told her, which wasn't entirely a lie. "What happens if an employee causes damage to a client's property, or if someone gets injured on the job? I want to make sure Maren and I are protected personally." Janet recommended creating a more formal corporate structure with clear separation between business and personal assets. We spent 2 hours restructuring the business as an LLC with me as the primary member and Maren as a limited partner. On paper, it looked like smart business planning. In reality, it gave me complete control over business operations and protected my personal assets from any claims related to employee misconduct. The second phase involved documenting everything Tyler and Maren were doing wrong. I installed additional security cameras in our office and garage, all completely legal since I owned the property. I started requiring detailed timesheets from all employees, including management, to track exactly when people were working and where they were going. Tyler initially complained about the new requirements. "Seems like a lot of paperwork for something that was working fine before," he said during a staff meeting. "Insurance company wants better documentation," I replied. "Claims they can reduce our premiums if we can prove our employees are following proper procedures." It was amazing how easily lies came when you were surrounded by liars. The new documentation requirements revealed the full scope of their deception. Tyler was claiming 45 hours per week, while actually working maybe 30. Maren was billing administrative time for hours, when she was either not in the office or was in the office with Tyler doing things that definitely weren't administrative. More importantly, the detailed scheduling revealed their pattern. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons were their regular meeting times, usually at client locations where they could use the cars for privacy. They'd schedule fake appointments at addresses where they knew the clients wouldn't be home, perform minimal work if any, and spend the rest of the time on their personal activities. I started following them occasionally, always staying far enough away to avoid detection, but close enough to confirm what I already knew. Watching your wife cheat is a special kind of torture, but I needed to understand their routine completely before I could disrupt it effectively. The third phase was the most dangerous, gathering evidence of their theft. Maren handled our books, but she didn't handle our banking directly. I'd always maintained control over the main business accounts, requiring my signature for any significant transactions. But there were smaller accounts for petty cash and client refunds that she managed independently. I started reviewing those accounts more carefully, cross-referencing every transaction with our client records and service logs. The discrepancies were subtle but consistent. Cash payments that were recorded as credit card transactions, allowing the cash to be pocketed. Refunds issued to clients who'd never complained about our service, with the money going to accounts I couldn't trace. Supply purchases that were double billed, with the difference disappearing into personal expenses. Tyler was stealing too, but his theft was more direct. Tools and supplies that walked out of our garage and never came back. Client tips that were supposed to be shared with the crew but never made it to anyone's paycheck. Gas charges for personal trips that were billed to client accounts. Individually, these were small amounts. Together, they represented a systematic theft of nearly $12,000 over 8 months. More than enough to justify criminal charges, and definitely enough to destroy both of their reputations in our small business community. But I still wasn't ready to move. I wanted one more element: public humiliation that would ensure everyone who knew us understood exactly what kind of people they really were. That opportunity came when Maren suggested we attend the annual Chamber of Commerce dinner, a networking event where local business owners gathered to celebrate the year's successes and plan for the future. Carter Clean had won an award for customer service excellence, and Maren thought it would be good publicity to accept the award publicly. "It's important for our reputation," she said. apparently without irony. People need to see that we're a legitimate professional business. I agreed immediately, which seemed to surprise her. We'd been growing apart for months, and she probably expected me to make excuses about being too busy or too tired for social events. Instead, I told her I thought it was a great idea, and that I wanted to invite our key employees to join us at our table. Tyler should definitely be there, I said. He's been such a valuable part of our success this year. Marin's face went slightly pale, but she agreed. Of course. Tyler deserves recognition for all his hard work. The dinner was scheduled for Friday night, 3 weeks away. That gave me time to prepare a presentation that would be much more memorable than a simple award acceptance. I spent those 3 weeks putting together a comprehensive documentation of their affair and theft. Photos, video footage, financial records, timeline analysis, and witness statements from other employees who'd noticed suspicious behavior but hadn't wanted to cause trouble by reporting it. I also prepared backup plans for every possible reaction. If they tried to claim I was lying, I had video evidence. If they tried to claim the theft was accidental, I had documented patterns proving intent. If they tried to turn other employees against me, I had evidence that they'd been stealing from everyone, not just me. Most importantly, I prepared myself emotionally for what was coming. Destroying your wife and your most trusted employee isn't something you do casually, even when they deserve it. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would present the evidence, and how I would handle their inevitable attempts to minimize or excuse their behavior. The week before the dinner, I made one final preparation. I met with Detective Lisa Mendez from our local police department, ostensibly to discuss security concerns for our business. I showed her some of our new security camera footage and mentioned that we'd been having problems with inventory shrinkage and unauthorized use of company vehicles. Nothing major yet, I told her, but I want to make sure I'm handling this properly if it becomes a bigger problem. Detective Mendez gave me her card and told me to call if we discovered any clear evidence of employee theft or misconduct. She also mentioned that the department had been seeing more cases of small business embezzlement lately, and that they took these crimes seriously, even when the amounts involved were relatively small. It's not about the money, she said. It's about the violation of trust. Employees who steal from small businesses are stealing from their neighbors, their community. We prosecute those cases aggressively. Perfect. When the time came, I'd have law enforcement ready to take my evidence seriously. Friday night arrived with unseasonably warm weather and clear skies. Marin spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing a dress I'd bought her for our anniversary the previous year. The irony was perfect. She was wearing a symbol of our marriage to an event where I planned to destroy it. Tyler arrived at our house to ride with us to the dinner, looking nervous but trying to hide it. He complimented Marin on her dress, carefully avoiding my eyes when he did it. They were both working hard to act normal, but I could see the tension between them. They wanted to be together, but had to pretend they were just colleagues. "Ready for your big night?" Tyler asked me as we got into my car. "More ready than you know," I replied. The Chamber of Commerce dinner was held at the Riverside Hotel, the nicest venue in our small city. About 200 people attended, including most of the local business owners, several city council members, and a reporter from our weekly newspaper. Perfect audience for what I had planned. We sat at a table near the front, close to the podium where award recipients would be called to speak. Marin and Tyler sat across from each other, stealing glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Other employees from our company filled out the table, excited to be included in what they thought was a celebration of our success. During dinner, I made pleasant conversation with other business owners, accepted congratulations on our award, and played the role of successful entrepreneur celebrating with his wife and employees. Nobody suspected that I was about to detonate a bomb that would destroy 2 lives and provide entertainment for the entire local business community. When they called my name to accept the Customer Service Award, I walked to the podium with a folder containing my prepared remarks. The audience applauded politely, expecting a brief thank you speech and some comments about the importance of customer satisfaction. Instead, I gave them something they'd never forget. I stood at the podium, looking out at 200 faces expecting a routine acceptance speech. Maren smiled encouragingly from our table, probably relieved that I was keeping things professional. Tyler nodded supportively, playing his role as the loyal employee. Neither of them had any idea what was coming. "Thank you for this recognition," I began, holding up the Crystal Award. "Customer service excellence is something we take very seriously at Carter Clean. Our clients trust us with their most valuable possessions, and that trust is the foundation of everything we do." Polite applause rippled through the audience. I paused, letting the moment settle, then continued with a slight change in tone. "Trust is interesting, isn't it? It takes years to build and seconds to destroy. Tonight, I want to talk about what happens when that trust is violated, and how a business responds when the people closest to you decide to steal everything you've worked for." The applause died. Conversations stopped. Every person in that room suddenly focused on me with sharp attention. At our table, I saw Maren's smile falter and Tyler's face go pale. 6 months ago, I started noticing irregularities in our business operations, missing inventory, unexplained vehicle usage, cash payments that never made it to our books. Small things at first, easy to explain away as honest mistakes or accounting errors. I opened my folder and pulled out a thick stack of documents. But when you run a small business, you learn to pay attention to details. And the details told a story that I initially didn't want to believe. Maren was shaking her head slightly, trying to signal me to stop. Tyler was looking around the room like he wanted to run. But there was nowhere to go, and I was just getting started. 3 weeks ago, I installed security cameras in our vehicles and office space. Completely legal, since I own the business and the property. I told myself I was protecting against theft from outsiders. Instead, I discovered that the thieves were already inside. I pulled out a remote control and nodded to the hotel's audiovisual technician, who'd helped me set up a laptop connected to the room's projection system. The large screen behind me lit up with a frozen image from my dashboard camera footage. This is the interior of our work van, recorded last Tuesday night at approximately 10:30 p.m. My wife, Owen Carter, told me she was working late on client files. Let me show you what she was actually doing. I clicked the remote, and the footage began playing. The audience watched Maren drive to the secluded parking lot, wait for Tyler to arrive, and immediately begin kissing him passionately. I let it run for 30 seconds before pausing it again. The silence in the room was deafening. 200 people stared at the screen, then at our table, then back at me. Maren had buried her face in her hands. Tyler was standing up, apparently trying to leave, but other people at nearby tables were blocking his path. Adultery is a personal matter, I continued, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. Painful for the betrayed spouse, but not necessarily criminal. However, using company vehicles for personal activities violates our insurance coverage and exposes the business to significant liability. I clicked to the next slide, showing a spreadsheet of financial discrepancies. More importantly, this affair was being funded by systematic theft from our business. Over the past 8 months, my wife and my assistant manager have stolen nearly $12,000 through false billing, unreported cash payments, and inventory theft. The numbers were displayed clearly, with supporting documentation for every claim. I'd spent weeks preparing this presentation, and every detail was bulletproof. They scheduled fake client appointments to justify being out of the office together. They used our clients' vehicles for their personal activities, including intimate encounters that could have resulted in criminal charges for trespassing and property damage. They billed clients for services that were never performed while they were busy with their affair. Tyler finally managed to push past the people blocking his exit and headed for the door. I let him go. Running away in front of 200 witnesses only made him look more guilty. I've documented every instance of theft, every false billing entry, and every violation of our professional standards. This evidence has been provided to local law enforcement, our insurance company, and the Better Business Bureau. I clicked to a final slide showing contact information for Detective Mendez and our insurance investigator. Anyone who has concerns about services they received from Carter Clean over the past 8 months can contact these agencies directly. We will be conducting a complete audit of all client accounts and providing refunds for any services that were not performed to our usual standards. The audience was completely silent now. This wasn't the kind of entertainment they'd expected from a Chamber of Commerce dinner, but nobody was leaving. Marin was crying openly, still sitting at our table because she literally had nowhere else to go. Tyler had disappeared entirely. I'm sharing this publicly because our business reputation depends on transparency and accountability. Carter Clean will continue to operate under new management with enhanced security and oversight procedures. Clients can be confident that their vehicles and property will be treated with the respect and professionalism they deserve. I paused, looking directly at Marin for the first time since beginning my presentation. As for the personal aspects of this situation, I'll simply say that some betrayals are so complete, so devastating, that they require public acknowledgement. My wife and employee didn't just steal money from our business. They stole time from our clients, trust from our community, and 7 years of marriage that I thought meant something. I closed my folder and picked up the award again. Customer service excellence requires honesty, integrity, and respect for the people who trust you with their business. Tonight, I've demonstrated those values by telling you the truth about what happened to our company and our marriage. Carter Clean will rebuild and continue serving this community with the standards you deserve. I walked away from the podium without waiting for applause that never came. The room erupted in whispered conversations as I made my way back to our table, where Marin sat alone, surrounded by empty chairs. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered as I approached. "I didn't do anything to you," I replied calmly. "I simply showed people what you did to yourself." She stood up unsteadily, her face streaked with tears and makeup. "You've destroyed everything. Our marriage, our business, our reputation. Was your revenge really worth all of that?" I looked at her for a long moment, this woman I'd loved and trusted and built a life with. 3 hours ago, I might have felt sorry for her. Now I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "Our marriage was destroyed the first time you climbed into the back of that van with Tyler. Our business was damaged every time you stole money to fund your affair. Our reputation was ruined every time you used a client's car for your personal pleasure." I picked up my jacket from the back of my chair. "I didn't destroy anything tonight. I just made sure everyone else could see what you'd already destroyed." Marin tried to say something else, but I was already walking away. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of 200 conversations about what they'd just witnessed. By tomorrow morning, everyone in our business community would know exactly what kind of people Marin Carter and Tyler Brooks really were. Outside the hotel, I found Tyler waiting by my car, apparently hoping to catch me for some kind of explanation or apology. He looked like he'd been running, his face flushed and his carefully styled hair disheveled. "Owen, we need to talk," he said as I approached. "No, we don't," I replied, unlocking my car door. "You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We never meant for anyone to get hurt." I turned to face him, and whatever he saw in my expression made him take a step backward. "You stole from me, Tyler. You used my business to facilitate your affair with my wife. You lied to my face every day for 8 months, while you were betraying everything I trusted you with. The money wasn't that much. We can pay it back. We can make this right." I almost laughed. "Make it right? You think this is about money? Then what do you want? What will it take to fix this?" I got into my car and rolled down the window. "It's already fixed, Tyler. You're fired, effective immediately. Marin and I will be divorced within 60 days, and everyone who matters in this community now knows exactly what you both are." I started the engine and put the car in reverse. Enjoy explaining this to your next employer, assuming you can find one who's willing to hire a documented thief. I drove away, leaving Tyler standing alone in the hotel parking lot under the streetlights. In my rearview mirror, I could see him pulling out his phone, probably calling Maren to figure out what they were going to do next. It didn't matter what they decided. Their reputations were destroyed, their employment prospects were non-existent, and their relationship would probably implode under the pressure of public humiliation and legal consequences. I'd gotten everything I wanted: complete victory, public vindication, and the satisfaction of watching two people who'd betrayed me face the consequences of their choices. But as I drove home to an empty house, I realized that revenge, no matter how perfectly executed, doesn't fill the hole left by betrayal. It just makes sure that hole is visible to everyone else too. The next morning brought 17 voicemails, 43 text messages, and a police cruiser in my driveway. Detective Mendez was waiting on my front porch with a cup of coffee and what looked like official paperwork. "Hell of a presentation last night," she said as I unlocked my front door. Half the department heard about it before midnight. I invited her inside, grateful for the professional distraction from the personal wreckage scattered around my house. Maren had returned sometime after I'd fallen asleep, gathered her essential belongings, and left again without waking me. Her wedding ring sat on the kitchen counter next to a note that simply said, "I'm sorry. Tyler Brooks filed a complaint claiming you've been harassing him and making false accusations," Detective Mendez continued, settling into my living room chair. "He wants us to investigate you for defamation and invasion of privacy." I almost smiled. Did he mention the $12,000 he stole from my business? Or the fact that he was using client vehicles for intimate encounters? He claims those are false accusations made by a jealous husband who can't handle his wife leaving him. I handed her a thick folder containing copies of all my evidence: financial records, security footage, documented timeline of thefts, and witness statements from other employees. "Everything's documented and verified," I said. "Bank records, video evidence, insurance violation reports. Tyler can claim whatever he wants, but the numbers don't lie." Detective Mendez spent an hour reviewing my evidence, asking detailed questions about dates, amounts, and procedures. Her expression grew more serious as she worked through the documentation. "This is solid," she finally said. "More than solid. You've got enough here to file felony theft charges against both of them." "What about Tyler's harassment complaint?" "What harassment? You installed security cameras on your own property to investigate suspected theft. You presented factual evidence of criminal activity to a public audience. Everything you did was legal, and everything you claimed was true." She closed the folder and looked at me directly. "Tyler Brooks is an idiot if he thinks filing false complaints will help his situation. This evidence is going straight to the prosecutor's office, and they're going to love how well documented everything is." After Detective Mendez left, I spent the day dealing with the fallout from my public revelation. The local newspaper wanted an interview. 3 potential clients called to schedule appointments, apparently impressed by my commitment to honesty and accountability. 2 competitors called to offer condolences and hint that they'd be happy to hire any of my employees who might be looking for new opportunities. Most surprisingly, I received a call from Janet Morrison, our business attorney, who'd heard about the dinner presentation from her husband. "I have to ask," she said. "Did you plan this whole thing when we restructured the business last month?" "I planned for the possibility," I admitted. "I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't sure how bad it was going to get." "Well, the corporate restructuring you insisted on is going to save you a fortune in legal fees and liability exposure. Maren's limited partnership status means she can't claim ownership of business assets, and the employee misconduct clauses will protect you from any claims related to Tyler's actions." Janet paused, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "I've seen a lot of messy business divorces, Owen. This is the cleanest separation I've ever witnessed. You're going to keep the business, the assets, the client relationships, And your reputation. They're going to get criminal charges and unemployability. Is that legal advice or personal opinion? Both. You played this perfectly from a legal standpoint. From a personal standpoint, you're either the most coldly calculating person I've ever met, or you're better at strategic thinking under pressure than most people realize. That afternoon, I called a staff meeting with my remaining employees. Darla and Tina, our booking coordinators, had been fielding calls all morning from clients who'd heard about the dinner presentation and wanted to know how it would affect their service. Mike and Carlos, our other detailing technicians, were concerned about their job security and whether the business would survive the scandal. Carter Clean is going to be fine, I told them. Better than fine, actually. We're going to implement new procedures, hire additional staff, and expand our services. I handed out copies of a restructuring plan I'd been working on since discovering the affair. Everyone who stays with the company gets a 20% raise, effective immediately. We're also implementing a profit-sharing program and enhanced benefits package. Darla raised her hand tentatively. What about Marin and Tyler? Are they coming back? Marin and Tyler are no longer employed by Carter Clean. They won't be returning under any circumstances. Tina looked uncomfortable. We heard there might be criminal charges. Is that going to affect the business? The criminal charges are related to theft and fraud that occurred without my knowledge or consent. The business is cooperating fully with law enforcement, and we've already implemented security measures to prevent similar problems in the future. I could see the relief on their faces. These were good people who'd been caught in the middle of a situation they didn't create and couldn't control. They deserved to know their jobs were secure and their employer was trustworthy. I know this has been a difficult situation for everyone, I continued. If anyone has questions or concerns, my door is always open. We're going to rebuild this company into something stronger and more professional than it's ever been. Mike, who'd been with us for 2 years, spoke up. What you did last night took guts. A lot of people would have just fired them quietly and tried to cover it up. Covering it up would have meant letting them get away with stealing from all of us, I replied. Every dollar they stole was money that could have gone to better equipment, higher wages, or business expansion. They weren't just betraying me personally. They were stealing from everyone who works here. The meeting ended with handshakes and expressions of loyalty that felt genuine. These people had seen me handle the worst possible situation with honesty and professionalism. They knew they could trust me to protect their interests and the business we'd all helped build. Over the following weeks, the legal process moved faster than I'd expected. Tyler was arrested on felony theft charges and released on bail, with conditions that included staying away from me, my business, and my property. Marin was charged as an accomplice and with embezzlement related to her handling of company finances. Both of them hired attorneys and initially planned to fight the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming, and their lawyers eventually recommended plea agreements to avoid lengthy prison sentences. Tyler pled guilty to theft and received 2 years probation, community service, and restitution requirements. He also had to register as a convicted felon, which effectively ended any chance of finding employment in our industry. Marin pled guilty to embezzlement and received similar probation terms, plus a requirement to attend counseling for gambling addiction that her attorney claimed had motivated her theft. I knew the gambling story was fabricated to generate sympathy, but I didn't care enough to contest it. The divorce proceedings were remarkably simple, thanks to the prenuptial agreement we'd signed and the corporate restructuring Janet had recommended. Marin had no claim to business assets, and her criminal conviction eliminated any chance of receiving alimony. She kept her personal belongings and half the value of our house, which I sold and split with her according to the court order. 6 months after the Chamber of Commerce dinner, Carter Clean had doubled its client base and hired 4 new employees. The publicity from my dramatic revelation had actually enhanced our reputation rather than damaging it. People respected a business owner who was willing to expose corruption publicly rather than hiding it. I received calls from other business owners asking for advice on employee theft prevention and security procedures. The local police department invited me to speak at a small business association meeting about recognizing and documenting workplace crime. Tyler left town after completing his probation requirements, apparently unable to find work anywhere in our area. I heard he was living with relatives in another state and working construction jobs that didn't require background checks. Maren moved in with her sister in a neighboring city and found work as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm that apparently didn't check criminal records very carefully. We had no contact after the divorce was finalized, which suited both of us perfectly. The red thong that had started this entire investigation was still in my evidence file, tagged and labeled like any other piece of business documentation. Sometimes I'd see it while looking for client records, and I'd remember that moment in the garage when I first realized something was wrong. I'd built my business by paying attention to details others missed, and that skill had ultimately saved me from years of additional betrayal and theft. The same methodical approach that made me successful at cleaning cars had made me successful at cleaning house when it became necessary. People sometimes asked if I regretted handling the situation so publicly, if I thought I should have confronted Maren and Tyler privately instead of exposing them to the entire community. The answer was always the same. They made their choices in private, but the consequences needed to be public. Theft from a small business isn't a victimless crime, and adultery that involves company property isn't a private matter. I'd given them both multiple opportunities, to be honest, to admit their mistakes, to handle the situation with some dignity. Instead, they'd chosen to continue lying, stealing, and betraying everyone who trusted them, so I'd made sure the entire community could see exactly what kind of people they really were. And I'd rebuilt my business into something stronger, more profitable, and more trustworthy than it had ever been when I was sharing control with people who didn't deserve it.